Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvasesha Sanyavadi Paschachari Shatarine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschachari Shatarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Om Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtota Satishvesi Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Ananta Kota Vaishnavinda Ki Nama Acharya Shri Haridasa Thakur Ki Prem Se Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasati Gaur Bhaktivedanta Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Ganga Maya Ki Jamuna Maya Ki Tulasi Deva Ki Bhakti Deva Ki Samaveta Bhaktivinda Ki Lord Chaitanya's Harinam Sankirtan Ki Prihat Padanga Ki Shri Prabhupada Ki Shri Shri Gaur Nitai Ki Shri Shri Krishna Balaram Ki Shri Shri Radha Govinda Madhava Ki Harinam Sankirtan Ki Gaur Premanandi. All glorious to the assembled devotees. All glorious to the assembled devotees. All glorious to the assembled devotees. All glorious to Shri Guru Gauranga, all glorious to Shri Prabhupada. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namo. Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Prachari Nene Vasesha Sanyavadi Pastachari Chatani. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. Hare. Welcome back, everybody. We resume our classes today, literally resume. And especially those devotees, I see several devotees from Russia. As Prabhupada said, preaching in the snows of Russia is sweeter than the sweetest mango. So I'm pretty sure it's cold over there in Russia. It's freezing here in France. Temperatures are below freezing point, but the preaching goes on, and devotees are going out on book distribution, Harinam Sankirtan, somehow or another, with whatever the obstacles are. We have to do our best to try to spread the message of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, whatever way, within our capacity, whether we're in New Zealand, Australia, Malaysia. I see some devotees from Malaysia with us today. Welcome. Philippines, India, and of course in Europe, different countries in Europe and in the UK, and in Russia. So welcome everybody back to our Zoom classes, and we hope we can continue giving classes. We'll see how the situation evolves, but that's the plan. So today, Rasikananda Prabhu, if you can kindly put on the third verse of the Nectar of Instruction. We finished the second verse last time, and now we're going to go into the third verse of Nectar of Instruction. I'll share it on the screen as soon as you're ready. We finished our book marathon here a week or so ago, and the devotees did very well. They had their biggest marathon for probably 30 years in France. I don't know the figures, but probably we almost doubled last year's score, despite the lockdown for the first 2 weeks. Somehow or another, Krishna had his plan. So here we are, we're on the Nectar of Instruction. We also had a very nice festival for the 45th anniversary of the installation of the deities here in New Mayapur, which was on Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj's Tirubhav. Very nice festival, maybe 150 devotees came for the festival. And what to do? Lord Chaitanya Sangha hear about festivals later on. We've got to be careful, of course, with the coronavirus and take precautions, etc. in these situations. But nonetheless, the Sanctum has to go on in whatever way possible. So here we are, text number 3. If you have Hopefully you can see it on the screen. We can all chant together just a Mangala Charan prayer for a few moments. Om Jnana Timarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutahe Swayam Rupagada Mayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuttapadakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Sri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Raganatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Padejana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Turubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. We can all chant together. Utsaham nischayat dhairyat tat tat karma pravartanat sangatyagat sato vite shadbir bhakti prasidhyati. One more time. Utsaha nischayat dhairyat sangatyagat sato vite shadbir bhakti prasidhyati. And on with the synonyms, the word for word meaning, please. Utsahat by enthusiasm, Nischayat by confidence, Daryat by patience, Tat karma, various activities favorable for devotional service, Pravartanat by performing, Sangatyagat by giving up the association of non-devotees, Sangatyagat. Sataha of the great previous acharyas, Vitehe by following in the footsteps, Shadbihi by these six, Bhaktihi, devotional service, Prasiddhiti, advances will become successful. So this now we're going to the translation of this third verse in the Upadeshamrita. There are six principles favorable to the execution of pure devotional service. Being enthusiastic, endeavoring with confidence, being patient, acting according to regulated principles such as Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, hearing, chanting, and remembering Krishna. And 5, abandoning the association of non-devotees. And 6, following the footsteps of the previous acharyas. These 6 principles undoubtedly assure the complete success of pure devotional service. Now, I'm going to read the first part of this purport, so please follow along. You can either just hear or you can also speak aloud as we go through it. It's very important to hear from the pure devotee of the Lord, and Srila Prabhupada, as we know it. It would say sometimes, if you want to know me, read my books. All my extras in my books. If you want to associate with me, this is the way through his Vani. It's through the Vani of the pure devotee. This is the Satovate section of this particular verse, following the footsteps of previous acharyas or great devotees. It's through their Vani. Following in their footsteps basically means through their Vani, following their instruction. So Prabhupada has given his primary instructions to all, everyone and anyone in his tremendous, presence and contribution through his literature, especially through the purports. Sometimes Prabhupada would say the purports are more important than the verse itself. Both are, of course, important. But oftentimes we don't read the purport, or we don't go into sufficient applicable depth, how it applies to us in our present situation. And today's verse is specifically relevant because the subject matter of last section was, of course, that which is unfavorable
negative towards devotional service or the cultivation of. And today's verse, and consequent weeks, is dealing with that which is favorable. Very important to know what is favorable. So let's read that purport. And Prabhupada starts off the purport here. Devotional service is not a matter of sentimental speculation or imaginative ecstasy. Its substance is practical activity. Its substance is practical activity. This is a very profound statement of Srila Prabhupada. Devotional service is not a matter of sentimental speculation or imaginative ecstasy. Its substance is practical activity. It's action. It's not just yes, I love Krishna, and we're just thinking about Krishna. That's also service, of course, but Prabhupada is particularly talking about the cultivation or the awakening of genuine devotional service freed of all inebriety, freed of all anarthas, devotional service which is pleasing to Krishna, not just pleasing to ourselves. The tendency is when we look at our situation in devotional service, we're in want. We're always wanting something. Oftentimes we want the devotional service satisfy all my desires. Well, in one sense, that's true, but not necessarily the way we look at it. We often think to make me comfortable in this world, to give me nice this, nice that, to remove all my karmas, and so on and so forth, and just make me feel blissful, so-called blissful. But that's not the essence of devotional service. The essence of devotional service, as we'll see now, Srila Rupa Goswami in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu has defined devotional service as follows: Anyabilasita Shunyam Jnana Karma Janavatam Anukulena Krishna Anushilanam Bhakti Rutama. And that means Uttama Bhakti, or pure topmost devotional service. We have mixed devotional service, which is generally the situation we're in. We're engaged under the direction of a pure devotee to some degree, engaged in activities which come from the pure platform, but our attitude and our application of the service, mixing it with, let's say, a selfish attitude or mundane attitude, or not even applying the process which the pure devotee gives us, or applying it to some degree, not applying it necessarily in the correct way. Thus, we're not likely to get the real result. We may get some relative result. We may get some, on the plane that we're living in, maybe some recognition, some material facilities, or some freedom from suffering, or something may come our way, but that's not really that's not the real purpose of devotion. Uttama Bhakti is our goal. Unalloyed devotion unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. Nectar of instruction is based on this principle, and sometimes devotees like to dive into the last few verses of Nectar of instruction, dealing with diving into Radhakund. And sometimes they do dive into Radhakund, literally. But this isn't the principle of entering into Uttama Bhakti. One has to be on the platform of Uttama Bhakti, not just Uttama Bhakti, but devotional service enriched with the mood of the resident, not just the residents of Vrindavan, but those in Madhurya Ras and those in that mood, following the footsteps of Rupa Goswami, to actually be able to actually enter. As long as one has an iota, Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj said, one iota of material desire, one cannot actually enter Radhakund. So nectar of instruction, as Prabhupada says in the preface, is particularly for neophyte devotees to prepare us so that we do become, or at least we have the opportunity to become purified. Because ultimately, what's the use of it all if we don't actually evolve towards Uttama Bhakti? Of course, there's no loss on the path of devotional service, but ultimately we need to reach the goal. It's like in any occupation, if we don't achieve the purpose behind it, sport or whatever it is, it's one hasn't really achieved one's objective goal. So the goal of devotional service, the goal of sadhana bhakti, everything, is to ultimately awaken unalloyed, pure devotional service, Uttama Bhakti, to come to this platform. It involves rendering devotional service in a way that is favorable to the Lord. Interesting here in this translation, Srila Prabhupada has placed the Swarup, called Swarup Lakshana, the primary aspect of devotional service first. He's placed it first. And what's called Tatashta Lakshana, or the secondary characteristics of pure devotional service, he's placed second, rather than the verse it places the other way around. Prabhupada is placing more emphasis on the actual essence. It's not just a question of being free from karma or free from material desire, free from motives, etc. That's the secondary characteristics of pure devotional service. The primary characteristic is it's pleasing to Krishna. That's the primary. And how we find out if it's pleasing to Krishna. Well, that's why Srila Prabhupada has put so much, given everything, to give us his purports, as well as many other instructions here and there. But primarily it comes from the pure devotees of the Lord, those who are pleasing to Krishna. It's a part of devotional service that we apply our own impressions, our own conditionings, etc., and we connect it somehow or another with some degree of devotional service, be it still, I wouldn't even say tinged in some cases, saturated with our own, contamination. But still there's something is there. We're so attached to our independence, to doing it my way, getting our own way, etc., being, doing what we want, etc. Getting out of devotional service what satisfies me, and so on. So this is a little short of Uttama Bhakti, but hopefully in due course of time, in the proper association with good fortune, that we may transform from that kind of rather, let's say, neophyte stage to a little bit more advanced stage, and ultimately to Uttama Bhakti. So in the presence of pure devotee, under their guidance, one gets this opportunity of transformation. It's devotional service, and if our service is actually favorable to the Lord, then naturally it's going to be without any extraneous motive, because Krishna's satisfaction is he's only pleased in the presence of pure bhakti. And Srimati Radharani is the personification of the highest form of pure bhakti, bringing pleasure to Krishna. And all the devotees assisting her are in the same category on different degrees. So we're trying to follow in their footsteps, Sato Vrite. This devotional service should be free, completely free, from any extraneous motive and devoid of fruitive karma, impersonal jnana, and all other selfish desires, whatever they may be. And we'll read on. Bhakti is a sort of cultivation. Cultivation is not just a philosophy, it's not just a sentiment, as Prabhupada said earlier, it's certainly not a speculation. It's bhakti is the eternal constitution of the living entity. It's not something we can speculate about. We may be able to speculate about certain things, but there's no speculative aspect to absolute bhakti. It is the eternal nature of the soul, the eternal, real essence of our very being. So, and it has to be cultivated. Cultivated. Sometimes we're called a cult. Well, it's cultivation. We're actually cultivating. In one sense, you could say there's nothing wrong with the word culture. Cult comes from cultivation or culture. Nothing wrong with the word at all. But it's used in derogatory terms in modern day society oftentimes. But the material world is actually a cult, if we want to use it in a derogatory way, because it's our own doing. It's our own independence, our own desire to try to have our own thing, so to speak, do our own thing. So Krishna provides this material world for those who are cultists, sectarianists, etc. The whole material world is just full of sectarianism and full of sects of different beliefs and different desires and different philosophies and so on. The real culture is the culture of pure bhakti, because that's eternal. It's not something which is, oh, that's your thing. That's your religion. There's no question of your religion or my religion. It's the absolute truth. Devotional service, bhakti tattva, is the eternal nature of the soul. As soon as we say cultivation, we refer to activity. So when we're in this world, we're a conditioned world where we have all of our every living entity has its own philosophy, basically. Even the insects, the birds, the beasts, they may be following pretty much uniform lifestyle, but they're still seeing themselves in the center. They're still centrifugal. They're still seeing themselves in the center and defending themselves and providing and so on and so forth. Cultivation of spirituality does not mean sitting down idly for meditation, as some pseudo-yogas teach. Such idle meditation may be good for those who have no information of devotional service. For this reason, it's sometimes recommended as a way to check distracting materialistic activity. Like a naughty boy, sometimes you tell them to, sit in the corner. Maybe they don't do that now, I don't know, but they used to. Used to have to stop doing everything, just don't do anything. Stand in the corner, it's kind of punishment, You're not doing anything good, but at least you're not doing anything bad. You could say the prison somehow, you could say, is a little bit like that in one sense. Is they may be doing something, but generally speaking, it's just to stop them doing naughty things, put them away in the prison. So keep them away. So in a sense, this type of no talking, no doing anything, simply idly sitting down and trying to meditate, depending on what we're meditating on, of course. But in general, it's just to try to control the crazy senses with whatever mode we're in, which are completely absorbed in materialistic activity and entangling the living entity in this material world perpetually. This is sometimes recommended to check the distracting materialistic activities. Meditation means stopping all nonsensical activity, at least for the time being. So stopping it is not the goal. Simply stopping our nonsense is not the eternal nature of the soul. Prabhupada was saying this morning in the class, he's saying Buddhism gives a tiny little hint, nirvana, a tiny hint into this path. What is that tiny hint? That tiny hint is at least stop your nonsense. He doesn't tell you what to do beyond that, but at least stop the nonsense. So meditation means stopping all nonsensical activity. Unfortunately, in modern day, we don't do it like that. We often meditate and perform yoga to actually facilitate our nonsense, so we can be more healthy to do our nonsense, or more peaceful amongst our nonsense. What to do? This is Kali Yuga. Therefore, these activities are not so recommended. Devotional service, however, not only puts an end to all nonsensical mundane activity, but also engages one in meaningful devotional activities. Prahlad Maharaj recommends what we see in the Bhagavad Gita. This is we have to have this higher taste. Automatically, if we're engaged in something, we're not going to be engaged. If we're going east, you can't go west at the same time. The two don't go together. So devotional service is, basically speaking, at least in the practice stage which we're on, is to engage our senses. One of the definitions which Goswami gives of devotional service is to engage our mind, to engage our body, our senses, our words in relationship with Krishna. And when they're engaged in relationship with Krishna, how they can be engaged in relationship to nonsense. You can't be both ways. You can mix to some degree, of course, but in the full sense of the term, if we're fully engaged in devotional service, automatically we're not going to be engaged in nonsense. Therefore, Prabhupada has given us, and Prahlad Maharaj has given us here, he recommends Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam Padasevanam Archanam Vandanam Dasyam Sakyamatmani Vedam. 9 processes of devotional service. And if we don't know them, we should learn these. 9 processes of devotional service. Hearing the name and glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Hearing. And it's not mentioned here, but we understand that Parikshit Maharaj attained perfection through hearing. At least he showed the path of perfection through hearing. He may have already been perfect. But he showed how to become perfect through hearing. And chanting his glories, Kirtan. Sukadeva Goswami is not, Kirtan is not just singing the holy names, it's chanting the pure sound vibration of Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, etc. It's also Kirtan. Chanting his glories of Sukadeva Goswami. So constant hearing of the Srimad Bhagavatam counteracts or removes all kinds of unwanted things and awakens our love for Krishna. Remembering the Lord, Prahlad Maharaj himself is famous for remembering the Lord, serving the Lord's lotus feet, of course, Lakshmi Devi, worshipping the deity, was that Janak Maharaj, I think, offering obeisances unto the Lord, like this, different process, acting as the Lord's servant, maybe Hanuman or Arjuna or something, making friends with the Lord, surrendering oneself fully to Lord Ambarish Maharaj. Shravanam or hearing is the first step in acquiring transcendental knowledge. and this is the most important thing amongst the point mentioned here, Shravanam is the first step in acquiring transcendental knowledge. Without hearing, how can we perform kirtan? How do we know what to do? We don't. We speculate or whatever, but we don't really know. We have to hear. But Prabhupada then goes on, one should not give oral reception to unauthorized persons, which is another thing. Generally speaking, we are hearing, but we're hearing from the wrong source. Even on the kind of spiritual path, we have a tendency to hear from those who we want to hear from, because they may say things which we, in our conditioned life, like to hear. According to our conditioning, somebody may speak something which, oh, very nice, I like what he said there. It agrees with my speculation. It agrees with my conditioning. So maybe there's a space for that in a very, say, neophyte stage, just to attract attention. It's like even Jesus Christ walking on water. So it has nothing to do with spiritual life whatsoever, or curing sick people. It's 100% mundane, materially speaking, but it's to create a little bit of faith in people, somehow or another, to bring them, just like we also do. You create a nice cultural program to attract people, or some fire gives or this or that, which attracts a certain class of persons, or very fanciful arrangements for kirtan melas and so on. So somehow to get people there, and then to try to arrange things in such a way that they can gradually come to this anyavilasita shunyam stage, this stage of becoming purified of all these other motivations. But to really understand this, one has to approach the proper person as recommended in the Bhagavad Gita, and one of the key verses, which many of you may be well familiar with, in the Bhagavad Gita, Tad vidi panipatine pariprashnena sevya upadikshante te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshinaha. And just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. It's a simple thing. If you've seen something, it's easier to describe it than simply if you've heard about it. We may have heard the truth, we may accept it or not, or we've heard some of it. We may not have understood it properly. We may present it in some situation. It may be somewhat correct, it may not be. But one has actually seen the truth is a little different. It's not that they've just seen, and this verse doesn't just require some kind of, as Prabhupada said, some armchair kind of watching the television type of thing, but they're actually living it. Seeing, realization comes from action. It comes from practical application of what we hear. They realize the truth. When actually seen, realized, seen not just with mundane eyes either, seen within. In other words, they realize their eternal relationship with Krishna and the real nature of the various energies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So they've seen that, and therefore it's easy to describe. It's like if we're in a maze. I don't know if you know this word, maze. We used to go sometimes when we were kids, we would go to what's called a maze. It's like a kind of a, what do you say, you know, some hedges, and you couldn't see where you were going until you got to the end of as a line you're going down, and then you come to a dead end where you turn right or left, and you don't know where you're going to be next. Quite fun for kids, that's for sure. But somebody who's above it can see where you're going. They can see you're going to a dead end. They can see you're going on the right path because they can see they're above the hedges. They're above the clouds. They're above the mist, the fog, whatever it is. They can see above it. They're above the modes of nature. They're transcendental. So they can see, even in our activities in this world, they can see that what we're doing is causing us problems. We think it's solving problems, but they can see we're just causing our own problems much of the time. And they try. We may not want to listen. We try to give some good advice sometimes to a naughty child. They really don't want to hear it. Even to a criminal, someone who has this mentality, and they may know it's the right thing, but they can't follow it. So, and what to do? Pure devotees are there, but we may not care to hear. We'd rather listen to somebody who will tell us to continue doing our nonsense. Don't worry. It is further recommended in the Mundaka Upanishad, Tad Vijnanartam Sagurum Ivabigatchet To understand that transcendental science, one must approach a bona fide spiritual master. That's absolutely, it's not just, okay, the word is mentioned there, Tad Vigyanatam Sagrun Eva Bigachet, Panishotim Brahmanishtam, that one has to, one must, it's Eva Bigachet, it's absolutely imperative. It's not just you can if you want, it means you have to. There's no other way. Krishna does not reveal the truth by any other means. Without humility, there is no way that one can actually enter into spiritual reality. Humility is the foundation point of, let's say, receiving that mercy, how to develop that humility of surrendering, submissive, pariprashna, this submissive mentality which is required in order for Krishna to give that, to reciprocate in that way. This is surrender. Thus, this method of submissively receiving transcendental confidential knowledge is not merely based on mental speculation. In this regard, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told Rupa Goswami, Brahmanda Brahmite Kom Bhagavan Jeev Guru Krishna Pasari Pai Bhakti Lata Beach. In the course of traversing the universal creation of Brahman, some fortunate soul may receive the seed of Bhakti Lata, the creeper of devotional service. This is all by the grace of Guru and Krishna. Amazing. How long we've been traveling in this universe, no one can say. Countless lifetimes, identifying ourselves with whatever form we happen to be in. And then somehow or another, by some inconceivable good fortune, mercy, causeless mercy, one gets the chance to associate with the pure devotee of the Lord. And if one somehow or another, whatever degree it is, but some degree submits to them, it may begin just by giving. Say, for instance, there are devotees on the street and they're chanting the holy names. There's some good fortune that somebody happens to be there at the same time, even though they don't really care less. It's a good fortune. It's the beginning. That's the beginning of their path. That little seed is in their heart. It may not grow very quickly. It may not grow in this lifetime very much, if at all. But the seed is there. They've got that picture of the Sankirtan, that sound of the holy name. Somewhere in their subconsciousness is planted there, in their subconsciousness. And that will assure their progress ultimately towards the path of devotional service. It will grow, it will grow. And if they go a little further, they might give 1 penny or 1 cent or 1 paisa, I don't have paisa anymore, 1 rupee is a donation to the mission. They get tremendous benefit. How pleased the goddess of fortune is. And by pleasing the goddess of fortune, we please Krishna. It's not that we try to usurp the goddess of fortune, take her away from Krishna. But when a person gives a little bit of stolen property back to Krishna, Krishna is very pleased, even though it may be very small. Or to speak if they take a book or join in with the kirtan or take prasadam, the seed is planted in their hearts. And when they actually do something practical, it's not just the seed is there, it's actually softening the soil so the seed can begin to grow. When we plant a seed, it has to be planted. You can't plant it in concrete or in rock hard ground. You can put it there, but it won't grow. It'll take a long time at least. But when that hardness becomes a little softened by that little act of devotion, they don't know anything devotion or not devotion, but that little activity of giving, surrendering a little bit, then the heart becomes a little softer, enabling that seed to gradually sprout. The material world is a place of confinement for the living entities who are by nature anandamaya, pleasure-seeking. We can't stop that, whatever our goals are, whether we're atheists, whether we're theists, whether we're Mayavadis, whatever we think we are. This tendency, anandamaya vyasat, this search for pleasure is unavoidable because that's the nature, Prabhupada says here. By nature, Our nature is Satchitananda. Without fulfilling that endeavor for Ananda, we're not really being ourselves. When people become so frustrated with failing to find fulfillment to that Ananda, they often want to give up existence. They take to Buddhism or impersonalism to a certain degree as well, the same thing. Or just if they're not on the spiritual platform, they just want to give up their body. They just can't handle it anymore. Because that nature of the living entity, Ananda Maya, is constitutional. You can't take it away. It's not a bodily thing. The body is a vehicle in order to try to satisfy that pleasure-seeking tendency. And when it's not satisfied, then we become completely frustrated. They actually want to be free from the confinement of this world of conditional happiness. They want to be free from this confinement. I'll just go to my book since it's not coming up there. Where are we now? But not knowing the process of liberation, they are bound to transmigrate from one species of life to another and from one planet to another. Yeah, we don't fulfill in this life, and well, what to do? We have to take another body because we're still Ananda Maya Sat. We're still looking for pleasure. But unfortunately, we have our karma, and it doesn't always assure us a human birth or a birth we like at this point in time. We don't know. The interesting thing, I'm listening to Prabhupada how this morning while I was talking about how, in different species of life, the type of pleasure is obviously not all of the same caliber. If you're born in the body of a worm in stool, that's a horrible thought to us right now, probably. But when you're in the body of a worm in stool, you don't remember anything else. That's it. That's your universe. And a little bit of stool is really nice. It's kind of like, a big day out. It's like a Christmas festival or something when you find some nice hot stool. And there you go. You're in ecstasy. Hog the same thing when it has the opportunity to eat a nice dish of hot, slimy stool. He's in ecstasy. For us, it's like hell. It is a kind of hellish lifestyle. But for them, it's normal. Prabhupada said even in hell, Maya makes it so that the living entity thinks, it's not too bad. Not doing so bad after all. This is how the material energy works, whatever situation we're in. When by good fortune, one comes to contact with a pure devotee and hears from him patiently. Second, the first thing is in this verse, utsahan, nisyat daryat. One has to, utsahan means enthusiasm. So we'll be discussing that over the course of the next few weeks and these various very important characteristics or, let's say, attitudes in our application of devotional service. Enthusiasm is primary, then confidence, and then patience. Daryat, we have to be very patient also. Can't expect it immediately. One begins to follow the path of devotional service. Such an opportunity is offered to a person who is sincere. The International Society for Krishna Consciousness is giving such a chance to humanity at large. If, by good fortune, one takes advantage of this opportunity to engage in devotional service, the path of liberation immediately opens. This is the door, as we famous verse, is it Rishade Mahat Sevam Dwaram Ahurvi Mukte Tamo Dwaram Yoshitam Sangi Sangam? I think it's Lord Rishade. Maybe I'm wrong, but whoever, the fifth canto of Bhagavatam, describes it by Mahat Sevam Dwaram Ahurvi Mukte, by serving the great devotees, Mahat Seva, by serving Tamo Mahat Sevam Dwaram, the gate, Dwaram, Ahurvi Mukte, to freedom, liberation from this illusion. The door is opened, but Tamo Dwaram, the gate to hell, is open. Tamo Dwaram Yoshita Sangi Sangam. By associating with materialistic persons, one is guaranteeing one's path to go down. So we carry on. One should accept this opportunity to return home back to Godhead very enthusiastically. We're very enthusiastic about things in this material world, huh? Whenever opportunity to make money, an opportunity to get a good job, an opportunity to get a beautiful husband or wife, an opportunity to go somewhere very beautiful, an opportunity for whatever, some name and fame, we're really enthusiastic about that. But the opportunity to go back to God, we may not be so enthusiastic about that. We're still a little bit attached in this world sometimes. We're not willing to sacrifice. We're willing to sacrifice so much for materialistic objectives, time, money, even name and fame, even risk one's own life sometimes to attain one's objective goal. They're willing, especially those who are kind of like, whatever, just an example, simple example. One is a criminal, one is a thief. Their objective, they're very enthusiastic to steal, and they're willing to risk their own lives. And they know this, they could get caught. But they're so enthusiastic, they're willing to do that. Without enthusiasm, one cannot be successful, Prabhupada said here. It cannot be. Without enthusiasm, what happens? Lethargy, laziness, apathy, these other characteristics become commonplace. And you get nowhere. Just lying around. Some people are so apathetic, they can't be bothered to do anything. They've lost the thread. Without enthusiasm, one cannot be successful. And this applies to the complete extent in devotional service. It's absolutely required. Without enthusiasm, we cannot progress in our spiritual lives. Even in the material world, one has to be very enthusiastic in its particular field of activity in order to become successful. Because one faces all kinds of objections, all kinds of obstacles on the path of there. People protesting against it, doubts which come in. So many things are there presenting obstacles. One has to be very enthusiastic to continue. A student, businessman, artist, or anyone else who wants success in his line must be enthusiastic, utsaha. Similarly, one has to be very enthusiastic in devotional service. Enthusiasm means action, but action for whom? If you go to some, they're simply sitting there all day, and they say, you say, what are you doing? And they say, I'm being very enthusiastic. Well, there is subtle enthusiasm too, but it doesn't come over. Subtle enthusiasm or mental, intellectual enthusiasm has to manifest in physical form as well in order to achieve or to the purpose behind it in the material plane particularly. It has to manifest in physical activity. Usually when someone's just sitting there, say there's a war between two countries. Yes, I'm very enthusiastic to win the war. And you just sit there doing nothing. You think it doesn't look like you're very enthusiastic to win the war. You have to, okay, there's time for planning, there's time for meditating on how to do it, etc. But you've got to do it. That enthusiasm has to manage in practical activity also. So that's at least on this plane. Enthusiasm means action, but action for whom? So now the question comes in. The answer is that one should always act for Krishna. Krishna takila cheshta. This is always for Krishna, pleasing to Krishna. Always acting for the pleasure of Krishna. In all phases of life, one has to perform devotional activities under the direction of the spiritual master in order to attain perfection in bhakti yoga. It is not that one has to confine or narrow one's activities. Krishna is all-pervading, therefore nothing is independent of Krishna. In other words, everything, practically speaking, can be connected to Krishna because it comes from Krishna. Everything comes from Krishna. Only the material modes, things become perverted, you could say, in their usage, or perverted in their understanding. But ultimately, everything comes from Krishna, like electricity comes from the sun. We have a minute ability to, let's say, manipulate it in various ways to produce different effects. But ultimately, it comes from the same source. Everything comes from the same source, Krishna. It's the nature of everything, actually, to return to its source. Water returns to the ocean, air has a tendency to go up, and fire has a tendency to go up towards the sun. Flames go up, they don't go down. They go up towards the sun, you could say. Like this, the living entities, generally speaking, an object, you throw it in the air, it comes back to the earth because it's from the earth. But generally, the tendency is that we're looking for our origin. Sometimes people go back into the womb, they have this experience of feeling going back there, which we all will do if we don't get out of this place. And simply the living entity is inner, deep, hidden within inside. Inner objective is to return back to our real origin, not just our material origins. People like to go back home to their hometowns, go back home after work, whatever it is. Some they feel safer in your origin. Ultimately, only when we return to our eternal original nature in the spiritual realm in service to Krishna, will the living entity be completely satisfied. That's their nature. So in all phases of life, one has to perform devotional service. It is not that one has to confine or narrow one's activities. Krishna is all-pervading, therefore nothing is independent of Krishna. As Krishna states in Bhagavad Gita, Maya tatam idam sarvam jagat vidyavyakthamurtina mastani sarvabhutani nachaham deshavastitaha. By me, in my unmanifested form, the entire universe is pervaded. All beings are in me, but I am not in them. He's everywhere. We can't see him unmanifested form because our eyes are covered. Atakshi Krishna Namadi Nabavad Gwaimindrai. With covered senses, we cannot see the Lord's transcendental presence. We can't see him anywhere. We can see his effects of his presence. If we're a little theistic, we may see it like that, but we can't see his presence. We can't, maybe we have some intuition in the heart, some feeling, but to actually be conscious of Krishna everywhere. And of course, that may not be quite the way we envision it, but for a pure devotee, he feels Krishna's presence everywhere. Everything reminds him of Krishna. He sees Krishna's hand working everywhere. He's conscious of Krishna everywhere. He's in Krishna consciousness. Very simple. And therefore, there's no fear. There's no fear because ultimately everything is the energy of Krishna. Everything is being guided by Krishna. He's behind everything. There's no need to fear anything whatsoever. Krishna is with him all the time. Because we forget Krishna, we become afraid sometimes. Under the direction of the bona fide spiritual master, one has to make everything favorable for Krishna's service. So this is a practical application of how this transformation goes. From seeing ourselves in the center to seeing Krishna in the center. Transformation by, under the direction of the pure devotee, practically engaging in these ninefold aspects of devotional service is the means of purifying our consciousness, our perception, and releasing us from our illusory state of consciousness and awakening our dormant loving attraction towards Krishna, which is there in our heart. It just has to be awoken. Once the seed of bhakti is planted there, then the process of awakening can develop. For example, at present, Prabhupada says, we're using a dictaphone. The materialist who invented this machine intended it for businessmen or writers of mundane subject matters. He certainly never thought of using the dictaphone in God's service, but we are using this dictaphone to write Krishna-conscious literature. Of course, the manufacture of the dictaphone is wholly within the energy of Krishna. There's another way of looking at it, isn't it? The energy which it's made from is Krishna's energy. The ability or the intelligence to put it together comes from Krishna. Everything comes from Krishna. The capacity for it to actually work is by Krishna's potency. The fruits that come from it are also Krishna's. Everything is related to Krishna. Of course, the manufacturing, all the parts of the instrument, including the electronic functions, are made from different combinations and interactions of the 5 basic types of material energy, namely Bhumi, Jala, Agni, Vayu, and Akash, earth, water, fire, air, and ether. The inventor used his brain to make this complicated machine, and his brain, as well as the ingredients, was supplied by Krishna. According to the statement of Krishna, but Stani Sarvabhutani, everything is depending on my energy. Thus, the devotee can understand that since nothing is independent of Krishna's energy, everything should be dovetailed in his service. This is a devotee. He knows that we don't stop doing things. We still eat, still sleep, even family life, mating, working. Recreation may also be, but everything is dovetailed in Krishna's service. The word dovetail means directed towards, channeled towards. It's not usually a common word in English, but it means connected with, turned towards, etc. like that. Everything is utilized in Krishna's service. Endeavor. Now, one profound statement. Here we go. A meaning of enthusiasm. Endeavor, executed with intelligence in Krishna consciousness, is called utsaha or enthusiasm. It's not just a matter of being patient for mundane purposes, of being passionate rather for material purposes. Some people may interpret enthusiasm as simply being very passionate, but it depends on the attitude, the motivation, as Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada says right at the beginning of this book, that the most important thing, everything depends on the attitude of the follower. Attitude. And here we see this endeavor executed with intelligence in Krishna consciousness is called enthusiasm. The devotees find the correct means by which everything can be utilized in the service of the Lord. Another prominent statement of Rupa Goswami Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhe Yuktam Varaga Uchate, that everything that we should try to use, utilize everything in the service of Krishna and not reject things. It doesn't belong to us to reject. It belongs to Krishna. We should utilize how it can be pleasure to Krishna. The execution of devotional service is not a matter of idle meditation, but practical action in the foreground of spiritual life. Now we're going to stop reading from the Nectar of Instruction at that point. And just a little comment there. The execution of devotional service is not a matter of idle meditation. Now, if we want to progress, there is no way we're going to progress in our devotional service unless we utilize whatever gifts God has given us under the direction of the pure devotees of the Lord in the service of Krishna. We can't speculate on it. We can't sort of withdraw and think, I don't need to do this or that. We're not on the position, it's our choice, but we're not on that level of transcendental loving exchange with Krishna to be able to understand because the whole purpose of devotional service is to please Krishna, is not to please ourselves, is not to please human society, is not to gain followers, is not to get a position in society, is not to get freed of karma. That's all. There may be some degree of secondary results there, but the actual purpose of devotional service is to please Krishna. So we can go back onto the screen, Rasikanand Prabhu. We don't need to hold us there now on the purport of Nectar of Instruction. We can go back on the, whatever you call it. Hare Krishna, welcome back. And enthusiasm. So today we're just going to begin. We'll continue next week. We're not going to go on too late. But enthusiasm is the key feature in the practice of devotional service. Without enthusiasm, we can make no advancement in spiritual life. And even Prabhupada says materially. Enthusiasm, an interesting word. I looked it up in the Gestal dictionary. Its origin, the origin of this word is a Greek word, and it really means possessed by a god. That's the original meaning of enthusiasm. Funnily enough, it means possessed by a god and to be inspired within by a god. That's enthusiasm. It's not just passion. It has a very much deeper root. So again, back to Prabhupada's definition, enthusiasm, endeavor with intelligence in Krishna consciousness. It's not just endeavor. It's not just Krishna consciousness. It's endeavor with intelligence in Krishna consciousness is enthusiasm. So it ultimately comes from Krishna. The will to fulfill what Krishna wants is real utsaha, is real endeavor. And that's you could say the underlying basic practical aspect of devotional service, isn't it? Is doing what pleases Krishna. So we have to find that out. And that all the more important, we have to approach a pure devotee, one who knows Guru Shastra Sadhu. He is normally interpreted in historical context as excessive religious zeal. Somebody got, maybe a little fanatical from a mundane point of view, but Prabhupada puts it in proper perspective. Endeavor with intelligence in Krishna consciousness, not just endeavor, with intelligence. Where do we get our intelligence? Now, Arjuna wanted to endeavor in the Bhagavad Gita. What was his endeavor? His endeavor was to give up fighting on the battlefield. He lost his enthusiasm to fight, and he was enthusiastic not to fight. He was endeavoring. but it wasn't with proper intelligence. He lost his intelligence, became bewildered. Krishna gave him the intelligence to act in Krishna consciousness, perform his duty, and become enthusiastic. All Bhagavad Gita is based on this, to bring us to this point, to become enthusiastic, to perform whatever our duties may be, but to perform them enthusiastically. Today, I'm just going to read some very interesting things, and we're not going to go into depth on it. We'll try to do that next week. Some very interesting statements of Srila Prabhupada about being enthusiastic. Let's see. Restart. Okay, we'll go into the details of gross and subtle enthusiasm next week, I think, and how we can properly direct our enthusiasm. This is an interesting letter from Srila Prabhupada. I don't know. Can I put this on the screen, Rasika? Do you know how to do that? I've forgotten how to do it. It's been so long. I haven't done it. There's a way of putting this on the screen.
Go on
here?
Yeah. Back to your screen.
How do we do that here? No. Not sure how we do that. I'll go here. That's it.
Yeah, and there's like share screen.
Share screen, okay. We're going to try to share screen. And then we go here, right? Here?
Yeah.
Okay. Make it a little easier for you. I don't know about that. It seems to have not worked. Something's happened. Sharing is paused. Bring your share. Is it there now?
Yes, Maharaj.
Can you see it? Yes or no? Put your thumb up if you can see it. Mother Savita, you can see it? Okay. This is a letter from Prabhupada to Tejas. Now, I can tell you frankly, Tejas was a really enthusiastic book. I am very much disturbed to hear from you that you would become disturbed in your mind. Do not be disturbed. There is no cause for anxiety. You are doing your best to serve Krishna. That is very much appreciated. So do not lose enthusiasm out of frustration. That will spoil everything. Krishna consciousness means we should always be satisfied and happy. Not that we must work something impossible, becoming overburdened, and then because we are unhappy by so much trouble, we lose enthusiasm altogether and give up all hope. This may happen in the beginning stages, quite sometimes we do. We feel hopeless. Maybe, as Prabhupada says here, taking on so much different situations and we're not ready for it or it's beyond our capacity. No, if too much endeavor is there, that is to be avoided. Just like in the previous verse, we saw this over-endeavoring. Of course, that was for material things which are difficult to obtain, but that can also be there in devotional service. We're not utilizing our endeavor in the right direction, or we may have a mixed reason why we're endeavoring so hard to achieve something. That can also create negative results. Too much endeavor is there, that is to be avoided. By all means, we must preserve our spiritual status. That is the point. Not that we are mad after big buildings, many devotees, life members, this, that. No. These are only ways to engage the devotees so that they may apply the principles of devotional living to some kind of work for practical realization of these principles. It is not the result of the work we want. If only one person daily, if we sincerely preach to such one person in a day, that is sufficient. Never mind big programs. Because Prabhupada is encouraging him. But the bottom line of everything is that we have to be, if we're not enthusiastic, what's the point? Real enthusiasm. At least we have to be enthusiastic for what we're doing, even if it's not with our own very deep Krishna consciousness directly, but because we're acting under the intelligence of a pure devotee, we should be enthusiastic. Krishna does not like to see his sincere devotees suffer or become frustrated or depressed. He will not stand idly by in any such case. So do not fear on that account. Krishna has got some plan for you. Always think in that way, and very soon he will provide everything to your heart's desire. Prabhupada, let's just think of Prabhupada's enthusiasm, incredible. Of course, he received the intelligent instruction of his spiritual master. It wasn't like he just made up his own program. He was given that instruction by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj to preach Krishna consciousness, and he made his life's goal to fulfill it. He often quotes Vishwanath Chakravarti's determination, enthusiasm to execute the order of the spiritual master under any circumstance. Now, the real enthusiasm with intelligence in Krishna consciousness does not waver. In the material world, we do see sometimes people's enthusiasm persevere, at least in this lifetime, to great extents, whether it's mountain climbing, political arenas, sporting arenas, whatever arena, business arenas. Some people are incredibly determined, enthusiastic to execute their programs. In devotional service, we have a perfect example of Srila Prabhupada, even with the discouragement of many of his godbrothers, and with the, what to speak of the difficulties in getting any help to get out of India, no help outside of India, and his own health was a challenge. He had no material facilities to achieve such a program. Nobody around him was doing it. He had no peer encouragement there. There wasn't very much you could say to warrant his intensive enthusiasm to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. But the real thing was there. He had made his spiritual master's instruction his life and soul. And that's the real essence of endeavor with intelligence in Krishna consciousness, to rack his brains. One time Prabhupada said we should rack our brains, thinking how we can serve the spiritual master. In his absence, particularly, Prabhupada said, that's the business of a devotee. This is the best way to engage or to control our wandering minds or our crazy brain, whatever is in our brains, by filling them up with thoughts how to spread Krishna consciousness. That was Prabhupada's mood, how to push on this mission. And this is the program of pure devotional service, how to push on this mission, Krishna. So that was a letter to Tejas, and Prabhupada was very much showing the perfect example of never, sometimes he would say, sometimes I do feel a little bit depressed. And Prabhupada says, sometimes that may happen, but the overwhelming enthusiasm, becomes overwhelmingly prominent or overtakes any slight, let's say, doubt or some kind of depression on the path. The sun is still there. And Prabhupada kept right to the end. He said, I want the privilege to be able to die in the battlefield, preaching Krishna consciousness. He didn't want to just leave this world in an idle situation with pipes here and there. He wanted to be preaching to the last minute. If his presence on this world, also to him at 70 years of age, now that should be somewhat of an encouragement to us, that at 70 years of age, Prabhupada literally began his world mission. Of course, he was preparing for it and so on, you could say, but the practical application of that preparation manifested in worldwide state at the age of 70. Enthusiastically against all the elements in America, he preached Krishna consciousness. And as a result, this movement is now spread worldwide. We're taking up that spirit of enthusiasm which Srila Prabhupada gave us, and we should also try to push on. I'm not going to read this. This is the pastime from the Srimad Bhagavatam. We'll go over that next week. And it's Srila Prabhupada discussing the situation of Gajendra, the elephant, and how important it is that we have to maintain our enthusiasm. Here's a nice letter to Dhananjaya in 1972. I have heard also from Revatinanda Swami how the things are going on there. Revatinanda Swami was in the UK. Dhananjaya was our president, actually, at this point of time. And Revatinanda Swami was a traveling sannyasi in the UK. And the report is also very much encouraging to me. I am especially glad to note that everyone is feeling so much enthusiasm to work very hard in this preaching mission. That enthusiasm must be maintained under all circumstances. That is our price for entering into Krishna's kingdom. And Prabhupada calls it price. Our enthusiasm for pushing on this mission is our price for entering the kingdom of God. And Maya is always trying to take away our enthusiasm to serve Krishna, because without enthusiasm, everything else is finished. We just become morose. We start complaining, criticizing, whatever it is. We lose all. Don't want to go to class. We don't like to read. Chatting around this lousy kirtan. Not into it. The enthusiasm must be there. Therefore, Rupa Goswami has introduced this system of regulated principles, which I have taught to you also. These regulated principles, such as rising before 4 a.m. for Mangalarti, chanting 16 rounds minimum on beads daily, reading books, going on the street Sankirtan, preaching to anyone and everyone, offering the prasadam. Like that, these principles of devotional service are there to safeguard us from Maya's attack by keeping us always enthusiastic. If we strictly observe these principles, we shall remain always enthusiastic. These are the sources and the maintainers of our enthusiasm to serve Krishna. As soon as someone is not following them regularly, it may be certain that his enthusiasm will gradually disappear. Therefore, my request to you is that under any and all circumstances, you yourself shall without fail stick to these principles and make certain that all of the devotees in your charge are also following them strictly. How these boys are advancing, they have got enthusiasm. Yes, we must make progress in Krishna consciousness. They have given up everything. They are young men. Every young man has to satisfy senses in so many ways. But no, they are so enthusiastic. But for understanding Krishna consciousness, they have given up everything. They are Europeans, Americans. They have got many allurement. But I have told them that you must give up illicit sex. They have given up. You must give up meat eating. They have given up. You must give up intoxication, up to drinking tea and cigarette. And they have given up. These young men, so they are utsaha. There is enthusiasm. Yes, we must do it. That is wanted. Not theoretically, on the armchair of devotional service. No, that will not be successful. Armchair theory will not help you. You must be practical and there must be enthusiasm. Then it will be successful. You are sitting in the same position and you are thinking that you are making progress. That will fail. You have to come out with enthusiasm. Then it will be successful. That is required. So, if we're not feeling enthusiastic, then probably something's wrong. We've got to make some adjustment there. We're going to do something. It's not everyone else around us that's the problem. Sometimes we tend to start blaming the temple leaders or the guru or the GBC or some family members or something or another, coronavirus, something or another we start blaming for our lack of enthusiasm, but it's not. It's in our own hearts. It's our own attitude. That's a nice statement. And here's another letter. It's a letter to Swati, and I will probably finish with this one. Yeah. Okay. Best way to maintain enthusiasm is by regular chanting with the devotees together in the temple and by having festivals. So you should immediately have one festival, then everyone will be busily engaged. This is the idea of festival, engaged. Of course, it's better if we're engaged in helping to facilitate the festival, not just coming along and trying to enjoy the fruits of the festival, which is also okay, but it's not as good. There are so many festivals that I can give you, one for every day, Prabhupada said. Festivals. Devotional service is meant to be a festival, constant festival, kirtan, hearing and chanting, serving and so on. Constant festival. There's a spiritual realm, it's like that. So the Prabhupada wanted his temples to be facilitating these various festivities, beautiful festivities every day. So I'm going to finish there for today, and we haven't gone into you could say more the philosophical aspect of enthusiasm, which we'll try to deal with next week. We just touched on the surface today, but we can see how important enthusiasm is of all the various aspects of devotional service. Without enthusiasm, nothing's going to work. It's just going to be dry lifeless and ineffectual. We're not here just to fill the time up. We're here to actually utilize our time in surrendering or serving Krishna to his satisfaction. So we're going to open up now for questions or comments, I think. Where are we? No, don't know what happened there. Doesn't look like I'm there anymore. Don't know, what do I do now? I can't, it's not going back on the page.
How to finish this?
Stop here?
Yeah.
Stop here, okay. Technology, there we go. Okay, Hare Krishna. We have a few comments or questions. And yes, it's very nice to see you again. Thank you. Can enthusiasm be forced upon oneself? How can one become enthusiastic at all times? Enthusiastic at all times really means that we're connected with Krishna or his pure devotee. We're connected. It's just like, how do you get electricity all the time? You have to have the plug in the socket all the time. If you pull it out of the socket, you won't get electricity. You might get a little bit left over from the previous time, but you've got to keep it plugged in. So we've got to keep plugged in all the time to the line of parampara, ultimately to Krishna. Can it be forced upon us? The opportunity can be forced. You can say, we do that. We try enthusiastically to engage people in devotional service. So in one sense, it's being forced, but real enthusiasm has to come from ourselves. It's not just a matter of force. It is based on love. Real enthusiasm is based on love. So reflective enthusiasm is based on lust, greed and anger and so on and so forth. And real enthusiasm is based on our constitutional position of love of Godhead. So to a certain extent, trickery, Prabhupada used trickery to engage us in various ways. He used competition to engage us in various ways. He used various things to get us. It may not be based on pure love. It may be based a little bit on mixed motivations, but because it's coming from the pure devotee, therefore it has some tremendous beneficial effects. Otherwise, you can read, if you really want to read a little bit more, in the Madhura Kadambini, this book of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, on the various stages of, I can't remember all the Sanskrit terms, where we get very enthusiastic one day and the next day we're not, because it's still based upon material goals, getting results, feeling good, whatever it may be. So that you go through those stages. So it's not real enthusiasm. It depends. Again, it's like devotional service. In one sense, devotional service means uttama bhakti, means pure devotion. But even in the mixed stages, it's still categorized as a preparation, a department of devotional service, although it's not yet mature. So yes, we try to enthuse the devotees to engage in getting up, chanting their rounds, dancing in kirtans, like Prabhupada said, even in regards to enthusiasm. Maybe I can, let's see. Yeah, okay, here's from Satsvarup Maharaj, I'll just read it. If devotees feel weak in Krishna consciousness with decreased enthusiasm for devotional service and in increased immature desires, the root cause is usually poor hearing and chanting. So we try to get, and then he goes on, how to get enthusiasm back? Just by acting enthusiastically, enthusiasm comes. Just try jumping in kirtan, even mechanically, and see if you can stay morose. Srila Prabhupada said, dance, even if there's no ecstasy, dance, it will come. So it's not pure enthusiasm, but at least it's endeavor. It's endeavoring, and we're endeavoring under the direction of the pure devotee of the Lord. We may not have much intelligence, but the intelligent enough to at least try to follow his instructions. And Prabhupada said, then we'll become enthusiastic. It will come, ecstasy in this case, or enthusiasm will come by acting. You know, I had one devotee, I can't remember one devotee friend, he was a psychologist a long time ago. He told me when people will come to see him in his office, they'd sometimes be really depressed. And the first thing he would say, now put your hands up in the air and be miserable. And they all start laughing. It's like a magic trick. Put your hands up in the air and dance. They didn't ask them to dance, but just by putting their hands up in the air, it's just like reverse psychology or something, somehow or another, to get the devotees to do things which will awaken remembrance of Krishna. So and we can do it ourselves to ourselves. Remember things which make us enthusiastic. Times in our lives when we were enthusiastic and we were, whatever, to preach Krishna consciousness, to follow the principles, or whatever it was, to do service. Times when, and we can reawaken them. Sometimes we get into a rut and we don't think we can ever get out of it. And it's sometimes pretty easy to get out of it. You just have to adjust things a little bit. We have this intelligence to remember situations which were, more favorable. We'll be discussing that more next week. Situations of favorable, unfavorable in practicing or evoking utsaha. Okay, let's go back. Re-enthusiasm. What happens if others obstruct the increase of our enthusiasm? This is different from not getting help, as in the case of Srila Prabhupada. This is different to not getting help. If they want him, Prabhupada, people wantonly try to obstruct him too on many occasions. And it wasn't just not getting help. People actually went out of their way. Sometimes governments, they certainly went out of their way in Bombay to stop Prabhupada from getting the Juhu property. In Calcutta, the Naxalites threatened his life. They tried to stop the festival going on. Many occasions, they stopped him entering into certain countries, and so on and so forth. So that happened to Prabhupada also. It's happened in many courses of history. It happened in the Christian religion with Jesus Christ. It happened with Haridas Thakur. They go out of their way to try to put blocks there. The idea is that Krishna's hand is working behind everything. And what is he trying to do? Is he trying to, therefore, to become angry, hoping it will become angry and attack the obstacle? Or what? No, it's really that we realize that what is an obstacle? An obstacle is when we see something separate from Krishna, be it a person, be it an object, be it our inner subtle condition of our consciousness, whatever it is. We're seeing things separately from Krishna. So when there appears to be persons or events which create obstacles or obstruct, when say the increase, well, what is real enthusiasm? Again, it's not just when things are going our way, and because that's not the way the material world works. So Krishna arranges at the right time for different devotees to help us to stop trying to think we're the controllers, that we're in the center. We're not in the center, neither we're the controller. Our business is to take shelter of Krishna, realizing there's a very important verse Prabhupada cites in this regard. I've repeated it many times. I'll repeat it again. It's in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 14, text 8. And this verse, as Prabhupada says, the guideline for all devotees in our Krishna consciousness movement. So I recommend you to read that and meditate upon it to help us to get a little bit off of me in the center and thinking, I'm controlling my devotional service and, these people are getting in the way and blah, 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 and so on and so forth. It's not. Krishna is trying to bring us to this point of surrender, of taking shelter of him. It's not about adjusting the externals. It's the mood, the attitude. He's trying to create this surrendered attitude and not just thinking, I can master devotional service by external adjustments. It doesn't work like that. They happen anyway, whether we do it or don't. The whole point is to bring us to this point of surrender to Krishna, taking complete shelter of the holy name, taking complete shelter of depending on Krishna entirely. This is the goal. The next one, merely accepting these efforts. Yes, okay, you're there. The devotee does, and he sees that this cleans away our past karma, be it good or bad. So when things are going well, we think Krishna's very kind. He's removing the reactions to my good karma. We certainly continue to endeavor, whether we do or don't. That's the point. But what happens may not be within our control, but an endeavor, or at least, the desire is with us. If we really, really want to achieve our goal, we know that Krishna's hand is behind everything. It's not happening by chance. There's no other God competing with Krishna. It's just what is allowed to happen. Krishna's energies are at work. And in the case of somebody who's aspiring to be a devotee, as we're trying to aspire, in our case, then certainly Krishna's hand is working. And any situation we find ourselves in has a positive purpose, whether it's going all day on book distribution. And if any of you have done that, you'll probably have experienced sometimes you go for 3-4 hours on the street and not one person has taken a book, not one. The weather's rotten, the people are swearing at us, you're feeling mentaled out, no one's taking a book, whatever. So many things. You can't find another devotee to associate. It's quite a challenge sometimes. Then we take shelter of Krishna. And sometimes we're doing really well on the street. And all of a sudden, I had that experience recently on a Prabhupada book marathon one day. First day I went out, I think it was the first day I went out on the marathon, maybe. I can't remember. In the first 2 hours, I distributed 17 Bhagavad Gitas. I thought, my goodness, if I carry on like this, I'm going to break a record. Recent record. And then 3 hours later, 19 books. Only 2 books in 3 hours. And Krishna had his plan. He's not there so we break records, so that we do this or that. It's that the whole point is to take shelter of Krishna. This is real enthusiasm, because we're taking shelter of Krishna. We're simply an instrument. The results are up to Krishna. Whatever Krishna arranges, we take shelter. We don't give up our endeavor to serve him. It's not about the results, or it's not about people treating us nicely or not nicely. It's about our constitutional nature to exist for the pleasure of Krishna. And this is a practicing stage. So we do go up and down. We do give up sometimes. We do come back again. And, we're in the stage of anishtita, Vajrayana Kriya, not completely fixed. We're not completely nishta. Sometimes a little up and down due to various past conditioning or present circumstances or Krishna testings. All of them are in action there. So don't just try to remember. How to remember everything. Try to remember Krishna. Give me the guidance. Please guide me, my Lord, what to do. Try to take shelter of Krishna. If we can't, at least we should try to take shelter of devotees at that stage. Hopefully you have that opportunity. Take shelter of devotees and try to get our intelligence a little bit more. Arjuna wanted to give up, but Krishna encouraged him to carry on. Don't give up. Never give up on this path. Next. I think I missed a few at the beginning. Here we go. This is little, and referred to in Bhagavad Gita. Punya karma is prerequisite for Krishna bhakti. What is actually that punya karma? Is it required? Is it acquired by devotional activities, association, or accumulated by other things like charity rituals? Please clarify. Thank you for that question. Prabhupada discussed this, Yesham Trantagatum Papam, Janananda Punya Karmanam. He discussed this on more than one occasion, I believe, when one devotee said to Prabhupada that even from the material perspective, the devotee said, I have no good karma as such, really. I've been very sinful. I didn't do any welfare work. I don't seem to have any qualifications. Acted piously in this life as well as in past lives. The sinful reactions are eradicated and freed from the duality of delusion. Hardly we're on that platform when we come into contact with devotional service. Where Prabhupada said, I have created your punya karma. It's not material karma. Devotional service is causeless. It is not based upon the normal karma, punya karma of this world. It's bhakti and mukhi sukriti. It is a piety born of good fortune. Gyata sukriti, sometimes we call it that also, in terms of its initial stage, an accumulation of a gyata sukriti. And Prabhupada said the good fortune, or that punya karma, is you had the good fortune of associating with a pure devotee. That's the real good fortune. And you've taken, your piety is that you've taken advantage of that, no matter what your karma is, no matter what your philosophy is. Somehow or another, our good fortune is that we've taken shelter, or we've had the opportunity to take shelter of a pure devotee. To the degree that we take shelter of the pure devotee, the devotional creeper can develop or grow. So that's the good fortune. And that's why it's so important to give this Krishna consciousness to others who have no interest. They have no good part, even materially, many of them have no good karma whatsoever. They may be sinful and some or other, but this is Lord Chaitanya's mercy. People are not eligible in this age. Normally, in a normal human society, the society is structured in such a way as that people are engaging activities which you could say are more in the mode of goodness, at least guided by the mode of goodness. They're engaged in activities which are less sinful. They're given this philosophy of understanding. But nowadays, nobody at school is being taught how to become free of the dualities of illusion. Nobody. They don't know what piety is or impiety. They've made up their own rules as to what is piety and what is impiety. It's pious to give a cigarette to a poor person, for instance, or you give welfare to people who are going to spend it on wine. Is that piety? Not really. It depends on our own illusioned idea of what the truth is. We make rules and what is right and wrong, but it's all wrong. It's all wrong. There's no real piety. Only if it's based on the Vedic system in a varnashram structure, then you can talk in terms of piety and impiety. Impiety means to perform one's duty according to the varnashram system and not deviate. That's duty. That's piety. So who's doing that? So this verse specifically, you could say, refers to the varnashram system, that one is acting in the varnashram system, which is the system given by God under the direction of the realized souls. It's Daivi varnashram. And naturally, in due course of time, when we come in contact with devotional service, and because one's following a God-given system, one will gradually become more and more eligible to engage in devotional service. But no such structure is in place in Kali Yuga. The only good fortune is the pure devotees spreading the message of Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement. And to the degree that people are given this opportunity, that is their piety. That is their good fortune. Their good fortune begins. And to the degree that they take that opportunity, that is their piety. There is no other. So it's a kind of a Kali Yuga situation. It can't be quite the same as in previous ages. The principles are the same, but the measurement of piety and impiety in this age doesn't mean much. It's just that if somebody accepts the chanting, even if they're full of sinful behavior and all kinds of nonsense, but somehow or another they've taken to the chanting of the holy name, then they're genuinely good for. They're very fortunate, very fortunate. People may say they're a nasty person. We may say this person's a nice person, but they're not chanting. They're not a nice person if they're not chanting. They're a nonsense. They may be materially, relatively speaking, in comparison to others in some little more in the mode of goodness. But what's the use of being in the mode of goodness if it's not engaged in Christian service? We're not encouraging people, therefore, to become nonsense and say, I'm chanting Hare Krishna. That's another thing. But sometimes people who are drunkards, people who are criminals, and so on, in this lifetime, we're all criminals in one sense, but literally, take to the chanting Hare Krishna. They're far more fortunate than somebody who's lived their whole life, doing mundane welfare work, etc., with no devotion. And that doesn't do anything to release people from suffering. Nothing at all. Just a temporary illusion. Not that we shouldn't do that also, but it doesn't. And in of itself, it's of no absolute value. Because people still remain in ignorance. They're still on the bodily platform, causing their own suffering, birth after birth. Real welfare work, real piety is that which helps release us from this material world. So the only real repository, the only real piety is there given by the pure devotees of the Lord. And we can become eligible simply by taking advantage of that causeless mercy which the pure devotees distribute. Anything else? Can we become free of doubt of ISKCON? Oftentimes service goes very well, but as soon as I have to deal with it as a devotees, one starts to become more aware of one's limitations, which somewhat or other become frustrating to the mind and intelligence, don't they have? All these things are so much to home, all these points and questions are very relevant to all of us. So community, institutional situations are sometimes chanting. They're meant to be there to facilitate our growth, and they are. When we take a step back, we realize without the association of the devotees, how long can we go on? All of our assets, spiritual assets, are born from association with devotees. Okay, sometimes in a family, there's a few quibbles and quarrels with one's mum and dad, but we're born of our mum and dad. We can't give them up. They're our source. They're our life sustenance. Child sometimes has a flip out with mum and dad too. But mum and dad's providing. The child very soon realizes there's no dinner, there's no breakfast, there's no clothes, there's no money to go out buy lollipops. We're depending on them. We're depending on the association of devotees. Krishna is correcting us. Now, what happens is this. In the association of devotees, because when we're on our own, we're just basically maintaining our conditional situation and somewhat engaged in acts of devotion, maybe. But when we're in the association of devotees, there's a challenge there. To actually come to pure devotional service, as we heard earlier on, it's attitude. And the primary attitude, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has said, which we mentioned a little bit earlier on, is Trinada Pisa Nichina Taror Pisa Hishna. Manina Manadena Kirtani Sadhari. Humility, tolerance, respect for others. And in the association of devotees, if you don't, if we don't cultivate humility, tolerance, and respect for others, we're not going to get much further than we already are. We remain on a plateau if we're lucky. If we don't commit offenses to others, we remain on a plateau. But to go forward, you have to cultivate this humility, tolerance, and respect for others. Cultivation. You have to be enthusiastic about that. Being the association of devotees is a fact. It's sometimes very testing and challenging, as Prabhupada said in the letter to Tejas. Sometimes we have to make some adjustments, but the principle is there that Krishna's hand is working because we're still holding on, seeing ourselves in the center as a doer, as the enjoyer, as a proprietor, or something or another. And Krishna's kindly, in the association of devotees, testing this and trying to bring us to the platform of actual pure devotion. The devotees may not be aware of that, but Krishna's hand works through them. And he's just frustrating us sometimes, whatever it is, just so we take shelter of him and not our own, we call it nowadays, comfort zone, so to speak, but to take shelter of Krishna. Here's a big topic. And I think that's it. Yeah, because the doubt is not a doubt of ISKCON, it's the fact that we haven't really understood what ISKCON is. We're seeing it as simply an institutional or an organism, organization that's meant to sort of be perfect in my eyes. As Prabhupada said, don't think there'll be any utopia in this world. There isn't. There's no utopia in this world. If I find fault in you and you find fault with me, Prabhupada said, we'll all go away. And we'll miss the very purpose of our movement, to come together and hear and chant. This is the real ISKCON association, is to come together and do kirtan, hearing and chanting together. Everything else has to go on. Sometimes because of our own faults, we see it as being an obstacle. It's one thing is when we see faults in others, Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj would always say, look within, see our own faults. The answer is always within our own hearts. It's not an institutional problem. It's not an external problem. It's not the other person's problem. Society should be arranged in such a way as to not to accelerate that aspect. It should be arranged in such a way which is most favorable, but whatever it is, it is. But we've got to look within our own hearts and see what adjustment do I need to make within my own heart. What lesson is Krishna teaching me here? We have to be a little bit introspective sometimes and not be lazy and just blame the institution or just expect that everything around us should do our work for us. It's there so to help us to do our own homework. It's not there to do it for us. It's there to help us to do it. So it's wonderful we have a little bit of homework to do, and we should see it like that. It's like if you just stay at home all the time, you don't have any homework to do. You go to school, they give you homework. You don't like it. We don't like it. You got to do it if you want to progress to the next class, the next stage. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. And we can become free. The whole Bhagavad Gita is to become free of doubt. The doubts in our heart, which have arisen out of ignorance, can be slashed with the weapon of knowledge. Armed with yoga, stand and fight, Krishna says to Arjuna. That yoga, that proper connection. But we have to connect with the holy name. We have to hear the holy name. And ideally, in the association of devotees, that's the submissive part. We don't mind chanting on our own sometimes. In the association of devotees, we have to hear others speak, hear others chant, hear from others. It's humbling. It helps to cleanse us of this tendency. Okay, everybody. Well, I think that's it. I don't see. Everything is there. Krishna is there. Take shelter of the holy name when we're in difficulty, which we always are. Try to take shelter of Krishna and not try to speculate or analyze too much. We can analyze our own situation to a certain extent, but it has to ultimately come to taking shelter of Krishna, not just trying to manipulate, maneuver. We're not here to become psychologists or psychiatrists or something. We're here to become simple. The problems are there because we're not simple. Our hearts are full of all kinds of different perspectives and concepts, etc. Become simple and take shelter of the holy name of Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So have a little kirtan and bid everyone have a wonderful day or night or whatever in your devotion, wherever you are in Russia. And some devotees are in the snows of Russia. I guess it's snowing over there. We had snow in France the other day. And some of you are in UK, some are in France, and some all over the place in India, maybe the Australia and New Zealand devotees. It's the middle of the night for them now. But if you're there, thank you for your association. Keep chanting. Don't worry, Krishna has a plan for all of us. Nothing happens by chance. Just take shelter of him. Try not to blame others, to blame the circumstances. Don't become over-blaming ourselves either. We may become depressed if we do that. But just try to realize that, this is our opportunity to take shelter of Krishna. That's our only fault. We're not taking shelter of Krishna. We're still seeing ourselves as the center. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Oh, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Please, everybody, don't forget, please keep Jayapataka Maharaj in your prayers. I think he's okay, but as you know, he has coronavirus, and because of his, you could say, very sensitive health issues, he has to be extremely careful. So please keep him in your thoughts and your prayers. We need the association of such devotees, that's for sure. Today is something. Is hate. Oh, I see. Oh, okay. Well, Gauranga Prema. Some of you know Gauranga Prema Prabhu. He's in Brazil now. Welcome, Gauranga Prema. And we have America with us now because it's getting into the morning. And Ireland have joined us, and many other Fiji. I can see so many countries there now. And some have gone, some from the Australian zone. Some have come in from the other zone. So, yes, today is Dhanvantari Maharaj's Vyasa Puja Day. Hari Bo. Hari Bo. Gokul, Hare Krishna, have a great day. Gokul Priya is the wife of Gauranga Prema, and that's her Guru Maharaj. So today is his birthday. Hare Krishna. Jai, happy birthday, Dhanvantari Maharaj. All glories to your service. And everybody else, a big Haribol to everyone. Haribo!
Haribo!
Oh, I guess they're all muted. Haribo!
Haribo.
Haribo!
Haribo.
Jai Prabhupada, Hare Krishna.
Haribo! Haribo!
Dancing, enthusiastic.
Hello, Maharaj.
Haribo! Hare Krishna.
Haribo, Haribo Maharaj.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Russia, Australia, New Zealand, Fiji,
Hare
India,
Krishna,
Malaysia,
Gurudev.
Philippines,
Hare
Ireland,
Krishna,
England,
Maharaj.
Holland, Germany,
Hare Krishna, Gurudev.
Switzerland, Ukraine, Lithuania, America, USA, Brazil, and everywhere else. Hare Krishna.
Haribo, Haribo
Jai.
Maharaj.
Go Premanande. Haribo.
Haribo.
Haribo. Be careful.
Good